Hey everybody, this is Sophia Florence, one of the hosts of the Crumbline podcast, and I'm here to tell you that we have new tiers on Patreon. And I know what you're thinking. Do I want to pay more for this podcast? Hell yeah, because you're going to get some cool shit with it. Our early supporter tier is now one of the new ones. Obviously, we have the old Help Us Grow one, which is just $3 a month. That gives you access to our episodes early and gives you access to our special episodes called Crumbs. The early supporter tier, which is $6 a month, gives you early access to the episodes like the other one, gives you some exclusive behind-the-scenes content. So there could be clips, bloopers, more other things that we'll be adding to the Patreon. A physical sticker pack, which is fun and themed designs produced by our illustrator, Chris Terendi. Patreon-only updates and polls that'll help shape our future content. So that'll be really exciting if you want to kind of be more of an active participant in what we're doing here. And it's, just kind of a perfect thing for fans who want a sneak peek and exclusive goodies. There's some really fucking cool designs. I can't wait till y'all see them. If you want to go a little bit more than that, we have the super fan tier that is $20 a month. That gives you early access to all the episodes. It gives you those behind the scenes episodes and extras. It'll give you access to something that the other ones don't have, which is a limited edition t-shirt. We've got one right now. It's super cool. I am not even going to show it to you guys. Probably have more designs over the years. If you want the shirt, come get it. It's $20 a month for that. Ideal for anyone who loves merch. They want to, tell people about our podcast and they don't want to actually talk about it. Some of us are introverts. You don't want to talk about shit. You just want to be a billboard, and I'm cool with that. And also, it's the same art that's on the stickers. It is super rad, and 40% of the tier's proceeds go directly to supporting our illustrator's work. That is Chris Terendi. He's at Chris Terendi, Tirendi art.com. ChrisTerendiart.com. Give it a look. I hope that some of you will join, and I hope that you will take part in some polls and tell us what you want. We want to make the content that you want within the confines of the stuff that we like to do. Please go to our Patreon, patreon.com/The Crumbling Podcast, and join today. Welcome to The Crumbling Podcast, a show about how John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt was my name before I came out, and that's why I had to change it to something distinct. Just kidding, it's a show about disinformation and how it has caused our sense of reality to crumble and maybe what we could do about it. I'm your host, Sophia Florence, and I'm here with my co-hosts,
Davin
and V.
And today's episode was promised in our double series with Laura Jedeed, where we talked about Ayn Rand. Rand was introduced to some guys from the Austrian School of Economics, and in order to understand both contemporary and earlier right libertarianism, we have to talk about these guys. Where some folks were coming from arguments on philosophical grounds, the Austrian School of Economics did a bit of that, but also tried to back it up with a specific approach. It's sort of the flip side of the Marxist coin, where both claim some kind of inevitability in political or economic behavior over time, but the Marxists claim that capitalism was a necessary thing that will also necessarily be eroded, and the Austrian economists claim that capitalism cannot actually be eroded. However, they actually have a different definition of capitalism than what we've talked about before, and we'll get into that. We'll also get into the Chicago School of Economics, which was preceded by the Austrian School and started by one of its members.
We're going to avoid talking about all of the people in the Austrian School and its history, because we're more interested in the impacts the ideas had, as opposed to all of their origins. It would just take too damn long and gets too damn complicated, and nobody got time for that. That all being said, the things you have to remember about the Austrian School are the following. It has a massive boner for the hard currency. By that, we mean the old school stuff. Gold, silver, and other precious metals. Individualism is a core of this ideology. And I know what you're thinking. Is the School of Economics an ideological thing? Yes, sometimes it is. In this case, more than ever, what we mean by individualism here is that they believe that only individuals as a unit have any impact on the economy, and even groups can't act except through their individual members. This is a weird thing to highlight, considering that's sort of obviously true, but also ignores the group actions do very much move the economy all the time. They also meant this to mean political individualism is there. They believe that any kind of state intervention in the economy would lead to ruin, whether that's economically or otherwise. Subjective value is king here. In previous kinds of economic schools, there's always been a theory of value. However, the value of some good or service is set. Prior to this, there was an idea that labor set the value, where the value of the good should be somehow correlated to the amount of labor it took to produce. Adam Smith had a certain version of this, and Marx had another. But the principle is about the same. Subjective value throws all of that out the window. It says something is worth what people are willing to pay for it. What the actual fuck with that second one? What the fuck?
Yeah, the second one is kind of a weird thing to say because it's like, well, groups don't matter. And it's like, well, they do. We interact with each other. And yes, things happen because individuals do things, but individuals do things because other individuals do other things. Like pretending that humans are an island is, I don't know, kind of fucking dumb.
Yeah.
I don't know. That feels like such a cop-out to not try to impart change for groups by saying like, well, it just focus on the individual. That way we don't have to pay attention to the macro level. If like all the members of a group are not doing the same thing.
They have this weird thing where they focused a lot on microeconomics, but they also focused on macroeconomics in terms of like monetary policy and stuff like that. This is a complicated thing, but I think when people try to be like, oh, we are only thinking about the individual. No, you're not. Like it's just a faulty premise. It's not even like, can we think about the entire economy as individual units of people? Sure, but like an economy is how people interact with each other. It is how people buy and sell goods from each other, that kind of thing. It's kind of weird to be like, there's only individuals here. Like it's like, well, I mean, I guess if you just look at it that way, sure, but like that doesn't explain everything.
No.
It's lazy. It's very lazy.
There's 4 big figures that we'll focus on for the Austrian and Chicago School Economics. Ludwig von Mises, Murray Rothbard. Okay, sorry. There's 4 big figures that we'll focus on for the Austrian and Chicago School of Economics. Ludwig von Mises, Murray Rothbard, Milton Friedman, and Friedrich Hayek. No relation to Selma, as far as we know. Von Mises was the teacher here, and Rothbard and Hayek were the students. I won't say as much about von Mises, more for the sake of brevity than anything, but he's more than an honorable or dishonorable, whichever, mention here. You may recall the name Mises from the Mises Institute, which we quoted in a previous episode. This isn't an accident. It's absolutely named after him. He fought in World War I and wrote pretty well about it. He worked under an early fascist government under Engelbert Dollfuss, the dictator of Austria. He also worked under a Christian democratic government, which, if that's not a term you're familiar with, it's sort of the center-right of European politics. The vast majority of center-right parties in Europe belong to this movement. It's not far off of libertarianism, but often advocates for a small welfare state. Afterwards, he moved to the US and continued his work. One of his first noteworthy contributions here is what he called the economic calculation problem, introduced in 1920. The basic thesis here is that people can individually make decisions on the value of goods to themselves, and prices will be set by supply and demand, which, if you paid attention to how things are in the world, that's certainly not something that works out to be fully true. There's certainly more demand for insulin than gets sold, and the price of producing it is quite low, but still, price gouging occurs. That being said, Mises insisted that no one can calculate how things should be priced, and no central authority should try. From here, he developed sort of a value-neutral approach to economics. Prices cannot be too high or too low because they set themselves. Somehow, he argues that the study of human action, or praxeology, is what will reveal everything that you need to know about prices. This is sort of the rallying cry from the movement for here, and perhaps his most significant contribution, although this methodology also led him to try to marry macroeconomics and microeconomics, which was honestly not a bad idea.
So in terms of his reaction to political events, he hated the political left more than anything, but he did not really develop any sympathy for far-right fascists either, and insisted that Nazism and Mussolini's regime should be crushed outright. He was not a fan of the government doing much of anything, and thought that free people left to make their own decisions on basically everything would develop the best possible conclusion. So at least he was logically consistent, I guess. Anyway, he'll return next episode.
What is wrong with these dudes? Like, what is up with them?
Libertarian brain.
Yeah, the economic calculation problem is sort of this like very silly idea. I sort of get where it came from because like at the time, 1920, you don't have computers yet. You don't have complex ways to calculate problems, right?
No.
You have a fucking abacus. All of your logarithms are in tables. Yeah, you have to buy a book to do the log of anything.
Yeah.
There's no good way to do the calculations at that point. But that doesn't mean that you can't estimate how something will behave. And like, that's the big weakness in his argument. Sure, you can't perfectly calculate exactly what the price should be on a specific day, but also the market doesn't set a reasonable price. This stuff just happens. People just do things.
Yeah. I'm just just look at this. It just feels so weird where it's like, yeah, it's whoever you want to pay for it. What are you willing to pay? Your soul? It just feels so ghoulish, you know?
Yeah, there are so many things that people actually need. People are willing to pay whatever they can. Housing prices are clearly too high, and everyone agrees on this except for Ludwig von Mises.
Of course.
What I will say is that, like, at least some of these guys are, like, logically consistent. They're like, I think government is bad. And von Mises was like, no, I literally think government is bad. All of the government, it's all bad all the time. And, like, he sticks to that. So, good for him. Let's move on to Hayek next. I'm saving the best for last because I think Rothbard is maybe more wrapped up in libertarian movements in a lot of ways and more consequential. Hayek studied under von Mises and eventually started an Institute for Economic Research before ending up at the London School of Economics. He had a lot of bickering back and forth with John Maynard Keynes, who ultimately created the basis for more modern orthodox economics. Keynes was the guy who laid out the idea of government spending being used for stimulus, and a lot of other stuff that Hayek and Mises just absolutely fucking hate. Keynes was the guy who is the modern orthodoxy. And it's not to say that he was right about everything in any way, but he laid out a lot of theory that most economists that are reasonable still rely on. Hayek wasn't a fan of the Nazis either, and he chose to stay in England because of them. He eventually ends up in Chicago, but Hayek wrote a book that is wildly influential on the right. It's called The Road to Serfdom.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, this is a very famous book. It's at once a pro-democracy book and an anti-socialist book, which is sort of interesting for thinkers on the right, because these folks often had this idea of a natural aristocracy. And you don't really get that with Hayek or von Mises or Milton Friedman. These aren't guys who believe that things should be ordered based on a meritocracy, and all of them actually come to agree with the idea of like a limited welfare state. These are guys who do not think people should fall through the cracks. Hayek believed that you can't really have human liberty at all without economic freedom. He lays out in that book, The Road to Serfdom, a more philosophical argument that socialism or even any kind of mild social planning of resources leads to authoritarianism. He's concerned with the idea that this allows the power over pricing to be put in the hands of a few people and treats other people as a means to an end. An argument from him follows.
To prohibit the use of certain poisonous substances or to require special precautions in their use, to limit working hours or to require certain sanitary arrangements is fully compatible with the preservation of competition. The only question here is whether, in the particular instance, the advantages gained are greater than the social costs they impose. If you want our opinion, that
one's complicated because he doesn't think that there should be no regulation. And he's saying like you have to question whether or not the particular regulation is worth the social cost of it.
It feels so much like they're trying to put a price on something that is effectively priceless, which is like human safety and the value of a life. And it's like one of these things like, hey, these two things should not be compared for the most part.
Yeah.
You know? However, back to our regularly scheduled quote, if you want our opinion on this, the answer is a firm no. If you want a good answer as to why, we suggest the Behind the Bastards episode, how the FDA came to be, as well as the book, The Jungle. Oh God, read that in high school.
Oh God.
There are a lot of good arguments to be made for regulation. Some of the best ones revolve around the fact that we shouldn't treat children as disposable. That being said, Hayek was pretty charitable towards the idea of regulations here. He wanted regulations to be applied equally and not as a means of price control or favoring one product or service. He believed in environmental regulations as well as preventing fraud and creating a social safety net. So this guy isn't off his fucking rocker, but he did want to restrict these things as much as possible and was skeptical of most of their applications. And a lot of this was liking some of the regulations in theory, but not as much in practice. He also didn't really argue with the idea of someone buying or selling something at basically any price they wanted, allowing for producers of goods to become their own tiny little tyrants. And his take on the welfare state was, well, interesting. Hayek was the guy that popularized the universal basic income. He didn't dive into this too deeply, so we can't fully get into his motives, but this idea was sort of an opposition of the welfare state for him. Rather than having the state dole out money or services for people below a certain income, he believed that it should just guarantee a minimum income, which appears to be from his work of roughly living wage. Although he probably balked against the idea that I'd assert such a wage existed, his thoughts bent towards only the individual knowing what they need and what they'd like to purchase. And so I think it'd be difficult to sort of what level of income that actually would be guaranteed. But I'll give him credit like von Mises. He's staying consistent here and advocating something that's still actually popular on the left these days. Hayek went on to work at the University of Chicago, where he taught Milton Friedman and others. Friedman was not like the Austrians. He believed that the government had a role in the economy, specifically in relation to the creation of money. That being said, he opposed the Federal Reserve, which he believed was responsible for the Great Depression, and believed it should be replaced by a computer program that automatically adds money to the economy at the same percent as the growth rate of the GDP. He was nominally interventionist on foreign policy for parts of his life, as opposed to the staunch anti-interventionism of von Mises and Hayek. Similar to them, he supported privatization of most things, including the USPS and Social Security, and hated welfare. He disagreed with minimum wage laws and also disagreed with racial discrimination and the so-called urban renewal programs. Y'all hear that dog whistle? Which largely amounted to a displacement of racial and other minorities in cities through a kind of government-sponsored gentrification. He also supported gay rights, legalized prostitution, legalizing drugs. He's libertarian.
The urban renewal programs were like redlining. They were functionally gentrification done by the government. So they would be like, oh, we're going to sweep out like all of the poor people that live in these slums and like fix them. Points to Milton Friedman for being like, hey, that's kind of shitty. We shouldn't do that. I am personally like anti-UBI person. I will die on that hill a million times over. I know that I am one of the few people on the left that hates the idea of the UBI.
I'm kind of fascinated. What are your reasons for hating it?
One, a universal basic income means that you are also giving that money to rich people.
Oh, shit.
Like, there's a reason that libertarians came up with this. Two, it means that, like, nobody focuses on allocating resources where they're needed. Like, the UBI was invented to replace every other social service. Like, you'll figure out what you need.
Yeah,
but, like, a lot of times when people need social services, they also need help accessing social services. People that are, like, homeless and, you know, dealing with, like some kind of mental illness, they don't have the fucking wherewithal. Like, if you were just like, here's $1,000, they'd be like, great, crack time.
Oh,
you're not fixing that person.
They don't have a discipline in their head, and it's not.
And like, there's no judgment from me to those people, but it's like, we have to help those people. And if you just hand them $1,000, you're not going to help
It's not going to work out the way you think it will.
And also, if you have an economy that's bending more and more towards automation, which means higher and higher unemployment, at some point, the UBI becomes the table scraps that you beg for. Like, you no longer have labor power to organize. Right? You can't just be like, you know, I want the UBI to go up unless you, I don't know, light the house of the person that owns the company on fire. You're kind of SOL. Whereas now, in terms of labor organizing, like, you can form a union with your coworkers and argue for a better wage. And that's not to say that I think wage slavery is better. What I think is actually like the better move is worker-owned materials. And then you take that and eventually start paying community dividends out of that. But it wouldn't be like a universal basic income that was guaranteed by the government, which was paid for by taxes of very rich companies owned by very rich people who were sucking up most of the resources in society still. Like, all you're going to do is consolidate their power.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about it. I mean, I don't know too much about it, so I'm kind of always interested in learning.
Yeah, I mean, we all love the idea of like, we get a certain amount of money per month and like that is your like absolute floor for like what you can live on.
Yeah, right.
But like, I don't think it's, I think it's a messy solution to a messy problem.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it tries to make the solution too simple, where the real answer is put resources where they need to go. And to do that, you need to think about it instead of being like, here's $1,000 checks for everyone. But also, if you start doing a UBI with checks to everyone, all you're going to do is end up subsidizing landlords.
Right. That could be a problem. They'll figure out how to game it. It's weird to be suddenly like the reverse of the 1980 welfare queens, but they'll game it. The rich guys will actually game it.
Yeah, but I think the difference is we have historical context for landlords and rich people means like gaming the systems versus like, the fucking welfare queen thing is that doesn't happen. Yeah, you may know one person, but you had to ignore 50 other people who were like using it properly, quote unquote, to even get that example.
Right. Well, Hayek and von Mises, no matter which way we slice them, were complex people with pretty complicated ideas on the role of government. These weren't your fully no government ever kind of libertarians. On the other side of things, we have Murray Rothbard, the father of the bastard movement that he likes to call anarcho-capitalism, which other people who call themselves anarchists might refer to as utter nonsense and basically a heresy against the idea of anarchism. For other schools of anarchism, eliminating control in the workplace by those aforementioned tiny tyrants was as key to living without authority as was getting a top-down state out of the picture. They're often rooted in a sort of purist ideal of democracy, where collective decisions happen everywhere. For Rothbard and his anarcho-capitalists, this was turned on its head. Democracy was not to be desired, nor even a republic. Rothbard wanted to privatize everything. I know that people might say that about modern Republicans, but we genuinely mean this about Rothbard. This guy had a solution for everything, and it was the market, always and forever. The only thing that he trusted was people buying and selling shit, I guess. A quote for an article that he wrote for the Libertarian Forum. I define anarchist society as one where there is no legal possibility for coercive aggression against the person or property of any individual. Anarchists oppose the state because it has its very being in such aggression, namely the expropriation of private property through taxation, the coercive exclusion of other providers of the defense service territory, and all of the other depredations and coercions that were built upon these twin foci of invasions of individual rights.
Okay, I want to point out something there. He talks about the coercive exclusion of other providers of defense service from its territory.
Military-industrial complex?
No,
Yeah,
cops.
Oh.
I felt like I had to point it out. Rothbard was a very complex guy. During his time in college, he was the one Jewish student advocating for the campaign of the segregationist Strom Thurmond. His parents were right-wingers, but many of his neighbors and friends as a kid were left-leaning. He loved H.L. Mencken and Albert J. Nock and Ludwig von Mises. He committed academic incest, getting both his BA in mathematics and PhD in economics at Columbia. He attended some of Hayek's lectures during his time teaching in New York. He became active in right-wing and early libertarian circles fairly on into the 1940s, forming a group called the Circle Bastia, which was sort of a libertarian hangout. If you remember the name Bastia, they're referring to that same piece of shit. He went on to write a textbook based on one of von Mises' books, Human Action, which ultimately became one of his own books by the end called Man, Economy, and State, which Mises fucking loved. But where Mises argued that the state had a function, namely security, Rothbard said, fuck that. Private militaries and private police are way cooler. Let's give everyone some rent to cops.
What a dick.
So that's where that exclusion of other providers of defense service from its territory come in. He wanted private pigs.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, he wants to privatize everything. Like, in his books all explain this. Rothbard advocated people having the ability to sell their children into slavery.
No.
That's a thing that he argues for. He argues that parents have absolutely no responsibility to their children.
Oh my God.
And should be able to sell them if they want to.
What a piece of shit.
And like, you could sell your children not into slavery. You could just sell your children into adoption, I guess. But he didn't give a fuck. Like, this guy was like, you should be able to sell anything that exists.
God, I hope that he never had children, actually. Did he?
I actually don't know offhand. I focused so much on like what he was thinking. I don't think that he did have children.
Yeah.
He was married. Let me look.
Because if he sold his children into slavery, we better find out now before we go any further.
This feels
concerning.
The odd thing,
it does.
The odd thing I'm discovering is like with all these people, it's like a blind squirrel finds a nut. You made one kind of good point about something, but then everything else you were just so off. It's a cartoon at this point in time.
Cartoonishly off.
Oh yeah, he's such a goofy fuck. Actually, I don't know if he had a wife or kids.
He probably sold them for money because privatize everything.
Yeah.
Privatize my marriage. The man was absolutely batshit. And so when I say he's a complex guy, that's true, but he's also a fucking crazy person.
Yeah.
So Rothbard eventually went on to call his political ideology, as we described it before, anarcho-capitalism, and stated that he was influenced by both the Austrian School of Economics, under which he studied, and earlier anarchists in America, such as Benjamin Tucker and Lysander Spooner. This is sort of where our story in these episodes, and I know it's taken 5 episodes to really start to have everything come full circle, but this is where everything starts to coalesce and all of the characters come together. He also, in his early career, wrote a letter to Ayn Rand expressing his deep love for her book, Atlas Shrugged, and the ideas that are contained within it. It is some sincerely weird shit and has kind of like strange incel vibes. I'll read this first part, and this isn't the weirdest one. To find one person that has carved out a completely integrated rational ethic, rational epistemology, rational psychology, and rational politics, all integrated one with the other, and then to find each with the other portrayed through characters in action is a doubly staggering event. And I am surprised that it astonishes even I, who was familiar with the general outlines of your system. What it will do to the person stumbling upon it anew, I cannot imagine. For you have achieved not only the unity of principle and person, and of reason and passion, but also the unity of mind and body, matter and spirit, sex and politics. In short, to use the old Marxist phrase, the unity of theory and practice. He's saying this to Ayn Rand about Atlas Shrugged. This guy fucking loves her. And then he said some weird insult shit, like a paragraph later. He said, I now come to the painful part of this letter. For standing as I do in awe and wonder at the glory and magnitude of your achievement, knowing from early in the novel that I would have to write you and express in full how much I and the world owe to you, I also know that I owe you an explanation of why I have avoided seeing you in person for the many years of our acquaintance. I want you to know that the fault is mine, that the reason is a deficit in my own psyche and not a defect that I attribute to you. The fact is that most times when I saw you in person, particularly when we engaged in lengthy discussion or argument, that I found afterwards that I was greatly depressed for days thereafter. Why I should be so depressed, I do not know. All my adult life, I have been plagued with a phobic state, of which my travel phobia is only the most overt manifestation, i.e., with frightening emotions which I could neither control nor rationally explain. I have found that unfortunately the only way I could successfully combat this painful emotion is by sidestepping the situations which seem to invoke it, knowing that this is an evasion, but also knowing no better way. So in this situation, I have never felt depressed in such a way as after seeing anyone else, so I conclude that the best I could do is avoid the reaction by not going to see you. I had naturally been too ashamed to say anything about this to you, and strangely, I don't feel ashamed now. It is as if when writing to the author of Atlas Shrugged, the book which conveys with such immediate impact the pride and joy in being a man, that it is impossible to feel shame for telling the truth.
What the fuck?
It's the weirdest thing.
Did they know each other in real life? Like, did he actually meet Ayn Rand?
Yeah, he had bumped into her before this. And
wait, time out. So this is equivalent of like the drunk, like, bro, we met one time at a party. Oh my God.
This is a drunk text, but it's a letter because it's fucking 1950 something.
Oh my God.
And
that makes it worse because you had to write that.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
And send it. With
he
a stamp.
Sat down and wrote it probably on a typewriter and was like, this is good enough to waste this paper on.
This man.
And like sent it off.
I can't even.
Yeah, Rothbard's fucking insane, which also is why I had such a fun time writing this.
Oh yeah, definitely.
A few years after that, he'd come to Rand's little philosophy group that we mentioned a couple episodes ago, the one where she hung out with Nathaniel Branden, who was a lover and a friend to her, and also kind of an acolyte. And Rothbard noticed that when he went to her philosophy group, that Nathaniel Branden basically kept anyone from talking to her too closely. He was like, no, I am protecting this woman from bullshit conversations, which, I don't know, that's pretty funny. After that, he had nothing but smoke for Ayn Rand, which is weird to do after writing that letter. But he even wrote a play about his interactions with her philosophy group. And the play was called Mozart is a Red. And he criticized her group as being kind of culty, which I think we all agree that it is. He eventually went on to say that her ideas were derivative, coming from Aristotle and others, and offering nothing really new to humanity. So the play refers to Ayn Rand as Carson Sand, and depicts an interaction of her with a 25-year-old history student named Keith that happens between Keith and her acolytes and Sand herself, which, you know, he's really not reaching for the name there. We're going to read from the play.
Yes.
I'll be doing the parts of Carson, while Davin reads for Keith, and V reads for Jonathan and Greta. I believe that Keith is supposed to be Nathaniel Branden, but it's not super clear, and it's not like he spelled all of this out. Like, this was a dig, and it is very funny. Well, Mr. Hackley, I'm glad you can come.
Thank you, Miss Sand. I'd like to tell you how pleased I am that you want to see me.
Oh, Keith, how could I not ask you to come after sending me such a splendid letter about my novel?
Oh, it was really nothing.
Oh?
I'd like to say, though, Miss Anne, that your book was an inspiration. The Brow of Zeus was one of the finest novels I've read in years. Oh.
Mr. Hackley, did you say one of the finest novels?
Why, yes.
Do you care to offer us the name of any novel that you've read in years that even remotely compares to The Brow of Zeus?
Well, I really don't.
If there's one thing we cannot tolerate, Mr. Hackley, it is imprecision of language. You said it one of the finest novels. What were the others?
Well, Hemingway was rather impressed.
Hemingway, good God! Of course, you know when we say God that we do not imply agreement with the concept. We are merely just using the term as a strong idiomatic metaphor.
Oh, Keith, can't you see Hemingway's death premises in every line that man writes?
Well, man's struggle against the bull, the moment of...
Hemingway is anti-life, anti-mind, and anti-reality.
It's so fucking weird.
What a...
Yo, what is this? What did we just read? Why? Why was this pinned?
Yeah, terms like anti-life, anti-mind, and anti-reality were things that you would see permeating through Ayn Rand's work. It was this weird way of saying that this is wishful thinking, this is socialist bullshit, and so they have to sound like more high and mighty about it, and so they make their own terms.
Oy, interesting people.
I've never wanted to sniff my own farts as bad as Ayn Rand did.
Yeah, just the ego or whatever. There's Freud somewhere in here involving Freud. Much Freud.
Rothbard loves burning a bridge, and burn this one he did. I personally believe the man was a repugnant skid mark on humanity's underpants, but I also think that he was an absolutely prolific shit talker, so credit where it's due on that. This play is very funny. Like, this is just a depiction of his reaction to meeting somebody who's weirder than him.
Yeah, seriously. He did good.
And that's where we'll stop for today. Our next episode will continue the weird journeys of Rothbard with many more burnt bridges and soured relationships, as well as Hayek and Friedman, who tended to build with them within the right-wing community. Like, these guys were bridge builders. They were working with other people, even when it was not 100% to their liking. I would say that Hayek and Friedman were more deliberate in a lot of ways, but Rothbard is sort of like Forrest Gumping his way through history, but like if Forrest Gump was a complete asshole to everyone he met. Anything you guys want to plug today?
Queer Wolves.
What?
Also, yeah. Queer Wolves is launched on Indiegogo, I believe.
So our producer, Eamon, and I are working on a short film called Queer Wolves. It is a lesbian werewolf rom-com. We launched in Indiegogo because werewolves are expensive to do in terms of special effects, and we got to pay people to be there and, actually make a short film, but we would like to eventually, make it as a proof of concept and eventually, hopefully, go on to making a feature-length film out of it. Maybe, submit it to some festivals, do some fancy things that people do with films.
Yeah.
But for now, it is on Indiegogo. We will bury it on the website so that everyone can find it. So not bury it, we will actually put it way out in the public, and we'll be like, here it is with like big yellow arrows that are like, donate to Queer Wolves here. And there's some good prizes for people who donate and help us make this cool thing that I've been talking about since 2022 a nice little reality. Yeah. But outside of that, we're gonna go.
All right.
See you guys next week or whatever.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.